Welcome to the Compendium Podcast, hosted by Leadership Books. In just moments, our host, Michael Stickler, will be joining us with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Michael. He's a 4-time best-selling author, philanthropist, publisher, and highly sought-after conference speaker. His passion is to see life-changing books find their audience. Books that will change your life, change your business, and change your soul. And he specializes in helping authors and business owners achieve publishing success. Won't you please welcome Michael Stickler?
Hi, thanks, Ron, for the great introduction. As Ron said, I'm Michael Stickler with the Compendium Podcast, and we really do have a special guest here today. A friend, an amazing man of God, and a guy that has written a pretty unique and incredible book. Andy McQuitty has been a pastor in the Dallas area for 35 years. He graduated Wheaton College in Illinois with advanced degrees he's gotten from Oxford University and Dallas Theological Seminary. He has grown one of the most significant churches in the Dallas Metroplex before he retired just in these last recent months. He received the C. Sumner Hemp Award in Personal Evangelism. He also received the John G. Mitchell Award for Outstanding Scholarship in Effective Ministry. He's been around a long time and he has a lot to offer, and it has a lot to do with this book that we're going to introduce here today. He also authored a book called The Way of the Brave, which I personally received a lot of ministry from. As my wife died of cancer, this book gave me great encouragement and reminded me just exactly who God is in my life and how I could depend on him. It's a super book. I recommend that you get it. It's available on Leadership Books. But the book we want to talk about today is a book that he titles Your Best Life Later. It's an incredible book, an amazing book, really, that gives a gift to every daughter and every son. And so will you please welcome Andy McQuitty. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So tell us a little bit about this new book, Your Best Life Later, and give me a sense of how this all came about, or give the...
Yeah. It's the most unusual book I've ever written, Mike, because I wrote it over a 25-year period of time, about 15 years removed from now. And when I wrote it over those 25 years of time, I never intended for it to be published, because what it was originally was a series of journals that I wrote to my children as they were growing up. I have 5 children, and I started a journal for each one of them when they were infants, in which I wanted to communicate to them the things that I, as their father and as a Christian influencer in their life, wanted them to know, but that they weren't old enough to understand. So I thought, I'm just going to write it down as if they're young adults and can understand it, and I'll give it to them 18 years from now when they go off to college. So that's how this whole thing came about. I never wrote those journals, and I actually had to get them back from the kids to do this book. And so here they all are. They're just 5 spiral notebooks, and in all the pages are just my handwritten scratching to my children as they were growing up. I did 5 of these, and I presented them all to my children when we dropped them off in their dorm room freshman year at the university where they went, and that was it. I thought I was done with it, and then we come along to just 2.5 years ago when I stepped out of being the senior leader at Irving Bible Church, where I've been senior pastor for 32 years. I became pastor at large. I'm still on staff there until the end of the year, but I'm more in an emeritus position and doing other ministry things. But when I did step out of being the senior leader there after 32 years, they threw me a big dinner party, and about 500 people were there. And my assistant, Donna O'Reilly, who had been with me for many years, she, unbeknownst to me, reached out to all 5 of my children who were literally all over the world and said, we want to fly you back for this dinner, and we want you to bring the journal that your dad wrote for you when you were growing up, and we want you to each of you pick something out of that journal that made a difference in your life and speak in front of all these people. And so the only reason Donna knew about these journals is before I gave them to my kids in college in their freshman dorm when they were 18, I may be slow, but I'm not stupid. I realized I got to have a backup on these things because, there's too much invested. So Donna photocopied them all for me, and she just knew that they existed. And so unbeknownst to me, she pulled this out and she said, come. Kids came that night. They read excerpts from these journals. And I tell you what, I was harassed by all my friends for about 2 months after that. You got to publish those. You got to publish those. And so that's when I got in touch with you, and we started this whole process of putting these journals, which were never intended for publication, into publication. And I think that's both kind of the strength and the challenge of this project, as is that they're totally transparent and gut level honest, and they're I think deeply sourced in God's word and wisdom, but not written ever in a form or with a style as you and I both know authors need to write for publications. Right. These had none of that. And so I think that's kind of the beauty of it, but it was also the challenge of it for us to digitize all these old hen scratchings of mine and then put them into form in this book, Your Best Life Later. And, I apologies to Joel on ripping off his title.
Bring that up.
I am not at all disparaging, Joel's book, Your Best Life Now. But, Your Best Life Later really captures kind of the uniqueness of this book, is that when I wrote the children these journals, it really was about their best life later when they grew up and became adults and so forth. So anyway, that's how it all came about. And, it's been, I would say the unusual thing about this for me, having published a couple of other major books before, is that those I wrote from scratch for publication. This one I never had for publication, but it was way harder. It took a lot more work. I thought going into this project, and I'll just confess this to you, Mike, I thought going into this project, this was going to be a slam dunk. I mean, sure. It's all written. All we have to do is digitize it and boom. No, we discovered going through this that in order to actually tailor these journals that I wrote to my children for a larger audience, that we needed to actually do a lot of editing and a lot of supplementing, not in terms of the original text, that's all there, but in terms of bringing around the entries, titles and subtitles and concluding PSs and aphorisms, so that we could present this in a usable form for our readers, like a devotional guide, right? That parents maybe would give to their children whenever they drop them off at college, or even parents would want to write originally for their own children in years to come. Yeah. So, a lot of work went into this thing, but I'm very excited about it, and I'm very grateful to you and Leadership Books for seeing the potential in this unusual project. I mean, I don't know of any other project quite like this, and it was a step of faith and a big risk, and I pray that God will use it for the kingdom.
What I found amazing and why I was so attracted to this project was that I thought back, I put my place back. I have, my oldest son is 40 years old. I thought back as a young dad, how completely clueless I was, how completely lost I was at raising my two boys. And I went back and I was looking at how you wrote and where you were, and I was visualizing you as a young man, a young dad with these babies and with these infants and with these toddlers and children and teenagers, and how you were laying your heart down there, and it's so, it's more than raw, it's more than pure. It is just really beautiful, and I found it's going to be so useful. Quite honestly, I feel so useful to young moms and young dads who are in this day. It's completely different than when we were raising our kids, but yet the common challenges, the common fears, the common things that are there, and the guidance that we want, and it's all there. It's all there as you wrote it, and that's what makes it so beautiful. What are some of the secrets that a reader's going to get out of that?
Well, I think possibly the greatest sort of uniqueness of this book is that it was written as a very personal love letter journal from a father to his children, with their best life walking with Christ later in mind. I've been blessed from my teenage years with being challenged to make the discipline of paying attention to God every day in my life something that is a high value for my life. And there's just all kinds of promises that God gives us in His Word. I love Psalm 34, where the psalmist writes, "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and His ears are attentive to their cry." And that when our eyes are on the Lord, David writes in that Psalm 34, and our ears are attentive to His word, we are invited to taste and see that He is good.
Yeah.
And I've always, even in my teenage years and going through college and seminary and the pastorate and raising a family of 5 and so forth, I've always just been drawn by this promise of God that if you'll pay attention to me, if you'll take time every day to be with me, just look at the blessings I'm going to pour into your life. All the way back to Psalm 23, where the Lord is our shepherd, and when we're paying attention to Him as a sheep, He will make us lie down in green pastures, and He will lead us beside quiet waters, and He will restore our souls every day. And so there's the refreshment of our souls that God promises if we pay attention to Him every day. There's also a powerful promise from Jesus Himself about answered prayer if we will be with Him every day. In John 15, Jesus says, "If my words are at home in you," and this is the Message translation. I love Peterson's take on this. If Jesus says, "If my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who He is, when you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples." So Jesus is echoing the Old Testament promise of God in the 23rd Psalm in the New Testament by saying, hey, if you'll just pay attention to my word every day, I'm going to refresh your soul. I'm going to make you fruitful. I'm going to make your life purposeful and beautiful. And ultimately, I'm going to make your life blessed. And that takes me back to Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 34, where God says, "Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors and waiting at my doorstep." So, the big motivation for all of this, even before I was motivated to write these journals to my children, it was a personal motivation for me to taste and see that the Lord is good, to seek Him every day at His doorstep and to find His blessings poured into my life. And He's done that over these years. We're just talking about how both of us back in 2012 hit a big physical wall. I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and that's where the book that you referenced, Notes from the Valley, right, Spiritual Travelogue Through Cancer, came. It was a blow, but it was a blessing because God just continued His refreshment of my soul and making me fruitful through all of that. So, I wanted this for my kids. And I'll tell you what kind of pushed me over the edge to start this crazy journal writing project. Well, first of all, when I determined to write the first journal, my first two daughters were born. Julie, my oldest, was 5, and Elizabeth was like 2.5.
Right.
And I just, I was going through the Proverbs one time, and I was reading these well-known words to all of us who are parents and who are raising families and so forth, where the wise man writes, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck." Now, until I became a dad, I always read that as one of the children, right, who's supposed to pay attention to my parents.
Right.
But after I had Julie, she's 5, and Elizabeth is 3, it suddenly occurred to me, wait a second. God's word to Julie and Elizabeth is that they pay attention to my teaching. And I asked myself the question, where is that?
Right.
Sure. God is telling my kids, you better pay attention to what your dad and your mom teach you.
Right.
And I'm going, as their dad and mom, okay, am I teaching them?
Yeah, I better get to teach you.
Yeah. What are they supposed to pay attention to?
Sure.
And that's when I just decided, okay, I don't know any other way than to write. I'm just gonna write to them, so that this can be my teaching that God instructs my 5 children to pay attention to for their own best good. And so that's kind of the problem, if you will, that motivated me to write this book is realizing that God was telling my children to pay attention to my teaching, but I didn't have any out there.
Right.
And so that's how this whole project started. And, so I determined to write, just a journal, and it's not daily. I mean, my goodness, at one point I had all 5 of these going at the same time, and I'm busy pastor and doing all, but I would just stack them in order. Like when I had all 5 of them going, all right, I would just stack them in. Oh, there we go. I'd stack them in order, and I'd write in Julie's journal, and then I'd take it, put it on the bottom, and the next one up is on my desk. And whenever I get a chance, I'm going to write in Elizabeth's journal. And when I write in that one, I just move it to the back and write the next one.
That's
and
great.
I did that. It took me 25 years to write all of them, but that's how it got done. And I think, Mike, in all honesty, if I had known when I started these journals from my 2 daughters, Julie and Elizabeth, that there were going to be 3 more of them, I think I might have had a reserve in my spirit about starting this thing.
Sure.
But once I was into it, I couldn't stop. I mean, it was like, and so I still can't believe I finished them all and wrote them. But God gave me grace, and it's been fun seeing how the kids have responded to that since.
And how have the kids responded?
Oh, they have been well. They are every one of them, and I say this without any bias or preferential treatment. They are all world beater followers of Christ around the world doing kingdom work. And I just all 5 of them, and they're extraordinarily successful. But let me make it this caveat, Mike, and I write this in the dedication of this book. They are that way, not so much because I wrote these journals to them.
Sure.
They are like that. They are that way because they had a mother, my wife, who is the real hero of this whole thing. She homeschooled them all for 17 years.
Wow.
She's the one that was there, talk about the Proverbs, pay attention to your father's teaching and your mother's teaching. They had this little bit of teaching from me. They had a whole lot from their mother. And she is an extraordinary woman who has raised 5 children and published 3 books and is working on her doctorate right now in Chicago and just going for it. And she is my inspiration. And if there's anybody responsible for these kids and the way they turned out and the things they're doing in the world, it's Alice, and she gives me some credit for at least being her support as we raise these children. So anyway, they're all doing well.
We mentioned at the top of this that you were pastoring for 35 years at Irving Bible Church, and tell us what you're doing these days.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited. We are in the process of launching a new 501c3 ministry corporation. It's a nonprofit corporation called the Kaleo Collective, which I'm the CEO of. I have a board. We've got our IRS clearance and certification, so forth, as a nonprofit. But the ministry is called Kaleo Collective. Kaleo meaning called, I call. But the point being that this is a ministry to those ministry leaders called by God to serve the kingdom, pastors, and all kinds of pastors, executive pastors, senior pastors, youth pastors, children's pastors, missionaries, ministry leaders who are called to serve the Lord. And the whole idea of the collective is bringing these pastors together for encouragement and exhortation. That's the overarching principle of it. The motivation to start this ministry was the year and a half of pandemic when most of our churches were shut down tight. We were losing 150 to 200 pastors a month in America.
I didn't know that.
Quitting, isolated, discouraged. People aren't coming. The money's not coming in, and they're just alone. And the thing that sustained me through all my 4 decades of ministry was that in every ministry that I had, started out as a youth pastor, I became an associate pastor, and then finally, for the longest time, I was a senior pastor. But in every one of those roles, I always had a group. I always had a group of guys around me. And, we helped each other through stuff like nobody else could, because we each understood what the others were carrying. And that's all I want to do with Kaleo Collective is, based upon the insight that if pastors in America have learned anything through the pandemic, it's how to use Zoom.
Yes,
so I'm figuring, why can't we connect? And that's what I am. I've been in the ministry for a long time. I know a lot of great pastors all over the country, all over our city.
Right.
And all I see myself doing in this thing is just connecting them, connecting experienced pastors together in cohorts,
right,
in Zoom meetings with pastors all over America, especially small towns where they don't have a lot of fellowship, and to provide support on a website that has a podcast and a blog. And so that's the simple thing I'm working on. We're hoping to launch it first of next year. Got to raise a ton of money, but that comes with the territory with a nonprofit. But it's exciting. It's way different from anything I've ever done. Oh, well, I guess I'm becoming a pastor to pastors.
Yeah.
And that's a role that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, it's funny. I just had breakfast with a local pastor here. He's from Incline Village up in Lake Tahoe, and he's coming to the end of his pulpit ministry career. He's going to retire here in the next couple of years, but he doesn't want to retire. His feeling is he has all of this stuff in him, and we were just talking about how to use all of that experience and all of that wisdom and to make a difference still for the sake of the gospel. And so I really respect what you're doing. And I'll make sure that when you're ready, I'll connect him up with you.
Yeah, please tell your friend to send me his contact information. I am looking for pastors like that to build cohorts and to have it all supported through the Kaleo Collective. And I would love to talk to him.
Yeah.
Because he does have stuff in him that we cannot let be wasted from the kingdom.
That's right. And when you're in ministry, you don't step out. Well, you shouldn't just step out and go, I don't know, go gardening or raise, raise dogs or something. There's just too much in you that you don't want to share. And yet you realize that really pulpit ministry it's now time for the younger men to step in. And so what a great idea. And they need help, and they need experience, and they need encouragement, and they need that wisdom that's gained. And you don't really realize that until you got a little bit of gray hair on your head.
That's right. What I've learned since I retired as senior pastor is that I don't know what I know.
Right.
Because I get together with young pastors and just, the questions they raise or whatever, and stuff just spills out of me, and I didn't even know I knew the answer to those questions. Right. But, you can't, if you stay alive and have a heartbeat through 45 years of ministry, you got to learn something.
That's right.
And
you better.
I've said to a lot of my young pastor friends, look, I can't tell you all the time the right thing to do, but I can most of the time tell you the wrong thing to avoid, because I've stepped in all that myself, and I can tell you where the quicksand is, and maybe throw in a few positive pointers along the way too. So anyway, this will give me a chance to do that, and Lord willing, we'll get it off the ground first of next year.
That's exciting. So folks, thank you for joining us. It's all about your best life later. You can get a copy of that book by clicking on the link right below, right down here, and hear more about and see just as Andy's life grew as a young man, a young dad, and how he ministered to his kids, and how you can use that wisdom and experience yourself. It's a perfect gift for your grandchildren, for your children, and even for yourself. Until next time, we've got another great podcast coming up here in just another couple of days, so watch for that. And until then, may God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.